I'm Lee Lai. I'm the creator of Canon, and this is the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to celebrate Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Lee Lai about the graphic novel Canon, published by Drawn and Quarterly. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button, so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Originally from Australia, Lee Lai currently resides in Montreal, Quebec. Over the past 10 years, Lee has been active working as an illustrator and cartoonist. Lee is a LAMBDA Award winner and is currently nominated for the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction and the 27th Bédélys Awards. Lee published Stone Fruit in 2021 with Fantagraphics. In our discussion, Lee chats about Canon, published by Drawn and Quarterly. The story of Canon begins like this. We arrive to Wreckage, a restaurant smashed to rubble, with tables and chairs upended riotously. Under the swampy nighttime cover of a Montreal heatwave, this is where we meet our protagonist Canon, dripping in little beads of regret sweat. She was supposed to be closing the restaurant for the night, but instead, well, she destroyed it. So without further ado, here's my chat with Lee Lai about the graphic novel Canon, published by Drawn and Quarterly. So Lee Lai, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate your time. Before I get going with all the questions, I would like to know, what was the first comic book that you read?
Okay, you gave me a heads up that you would ask me this, and I don't really remember because they're probably, like book form, the first one I can remember reading was maybe Blankets by Craig Thompson when I was in high school. And I can remember that because it had a big effect on me. It opens that large question of like, what is a comic? Because Sean Tan's comics, people don't classify him as a cartoonist. He's more of a children's book illustrator, but his was the first ones I read that I would call a comic.
Sure. I've always been told that children's books, picture books, are in fact prototypes of the graphic novel. Just
Totally.
an earlier version of it. So it's great that you get started in that way, but I got to know who or what inspires you to create today?
Oh, today, I mean, every cartoonist I know, I think there's something that's extremely motivating and inspiring just about talking shop with other cartoonists, right? And I think I was just in Australia promoting the book, and the Australian comics community is really beautiful. And everyone's really generous with, supporting each other's work and critiquing each other's work and editing each other's work. So I got to hang out with a lot of really great cartoonists. Off the top of my head, the three that come to mind, because I was with them a couple of weeks ago, Pat Grant and Meg O'Shea and Finn McCabe. And they're all Sydney or close by to Sydney adjacent cartoonists who make incredible work.
Do they have like celebrations or festivals where artists can get together and exchange ideas and promote their work to the public?
Yeah, I mean, it's all a lot smaller in Australia, right? Like there's like PCAF, which is the Perth Comic Art Festival, and the Festival of the Photocopier in Melbourne, and there's Other World Zine Fair in Sydney. There's nothing quite at the scale of Comic-Con or SPX or TCAF or anything like that, but it's growing. Like hopefully, in another 10 years, maybe they will be the same size.
I'm glad to hear that they have something going on. That's tremendous. Terrific. So we're here talking about your latest graphic novel, Canon. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the story. What is the story all about?
Sure. I've been told that I write unpitchable stories that have very unclear storylines to them that are mostly, like character studies. But the best I can do for this book is that it's a story about two queer Chinese Canadian women, and it starts in the ruins of a restaurant, which is the workplace of one of the characters, and she's just trashed the restaurant to bits. And then the story is basically backtracking the 3 months during a heat wave in Montreal leading up to whatever motivated her to do such a thing.
What was the inspiration for the story? Was it just like, what if, or was it something you heard from somebody?
The actual events are always entirely fictional, but the things that I tend to start with when I start a long form comic, mostly a series of questions that I'm asking myself or that I'm seeing as a theme in the conversations that I'm having with my friends. So the kind of threads that I began with this story were thinking about anger as a useful feeling, and long-term queer friendships, friendships that started in a place of scarcity, maybe, the only two queers in high school or something, and then coming of age in a second coming of age kind of way into adulthood and testing the boundaries of the friendship and if it's still relevant and important. I like starting with the skeleton being kind of emotional themes and questions and then building out the events from there. I started with this one wanting to have a bit of fun. And so, things like the scene where she trashes her restaurant are my treat to myself, getting a little bit sillier and campier with some of the events.
Did you start with a script, or was it something that sort of generated out of the illustration itself, or how did the process go for the creation?
I like to script a lot. I don't thumbnail, which seems to really upset some cartoonists when we talk about craft together. Like, I tend to stick to a pretty rigid four grid on all of my pages, except for a few. And so that part, I don't really see the need to thumbnail because of that, but I love to script. And so the whole process, which is give or take 2 to 4 years, is just like a process of going back and forth and really intensely scripting it out and then going straight into pencils from there. But I tend to script a lot because I write almost exclusively in dialogue. So I think that puts a lot of pressure on the dialogue to carry a lot of the plot. And I find that I can't really figure that out on the page. I have to be looking at something that looks more like a screenplay.
You're wearing two hats when you're creating your book. So at any point in this process, does the artist creator look back at the writer creator and go, wait a second, why did you put me in this corner? Did that ever happen in the process?
All the time, even just because it's so much labor, right? Like getting something into a drawing format, especially when it's just two people talking for pages and pages sometimes. I'm often just kind of giving my previous scripting self the stink eye to be like, why did I do this to myself? But like also those hats are not clearly distinct from one another, right? Like there's so much of the writing process that happens in the drawing through gesture or through expression. Like so much of the image can convey something that the text can't, and ideally vice versa.
Yeah, I've always been told that it should be show, not tell, when it comes to working on cartoons and comic books. A picture tells 1,000 words, right? That's pretty much the way
Yeah,
it goes.
yeah, and then at the same time, there's also something about like not showing a certain thing and implying it, and then leaving that the trust of the reader to kind of tease out in their own mind or to project their own experiences onto. Like, I really like thinking about constraints in my writing and in my drawing, and I think there's lots of things. Like, I think the show don't tell principle came a lot from screenplays and from cinema and film, and I think there's lots of things that translates well into cartooning, but then cartooning has its own logics because you've got multiple panels on a page generally.
Right. Now, you mentioned pencils and drawing. Can you talk me through the process of creating your art? Like, what tools do you actually use?
Totally. I'm pretty old school, so I use all traditional media for the most part. I have been using the same materials pretty much for the past like 8 years, which is I use a Strathmore Bristol board 9 by 12. I like the smooth one. The vellum one is a little too bumpy for me. And I have just like a mechanical pencil. Do you know the cartoonist Dan Berry?
I've heard the name. I apologize. I'm not
He
familiar.
he runs his own excellent comics podcast actually called Make It Then Tell Everybody. And I met him at a TCAF one year and we were talking about pencils, as you do. And he gave me this pencil that is, I think it's called the Kurutoga. It's like a Unipen maybe. It's like a nice light mechanical pencil and I've been using it ever since. The main thing for the drawing, like for the penciling process that I find really indispensable is a kneadable eraser. Like it's like this squishy gray lump essentially that lifts the graphite off the page really gently. And so I find for all the little micro adjustments as you're trying to find the form and you haven't quite got it yet, instead of, a regular eraser that scrubs the image entirely off the page, you've got these wonderful soft erasers that just lift it a little bit so you can kind of see the ghost of the line that you've made underneath. And I feel like it encourages me to draw light as well, which makes errors easier to correct because I make a lot of mistakes as I draw. And then I ink with, historically, I've inked with a Winsor& Newton sable brushes, like a Series 7 brush, like the 0 or the 00 size, but they stopped selling them in Canada. I think there's like some trade wars happening or something. Some
Mm-hmm.
guy in a paint store told me, and I immediately changed brushes because I hate the idea of being dependent on something I can't consistently buy. And so now I'm just using these like super cheap. I think they're somewhere between $3 and $6 each. They're Nobel, the cheap acrylic ones in the art supply store, and they're acting pretty consistently well. Like I find maybe like 2 out of 10 brushes that I buy are the ones that are really working, but then they will last for the better part of a year or two. So it seems like a pretty low-hanging fruit for me. And then just like Speedball black ink, the India ink that dries real fast.
I know that there's definitely a satisfaction element to creating traditionally, but do you ever feel tempted to move to any digital tools?
It depends. It would depend on when you ask me this as to how I answer it. But I tried. I like gave it a little go. I borrowed someone's iPad, and I just hate looking at screens. I'm kind of a Luddite. I don't like technology very much. I do end up on a screen a lot, because I scan my pages in and fix them up on Photoshop and, try and fix any of the mistakes I made by hand. But it feels like a luxury to spend like at least half of my day just working with paper because there's already just, emails and keeping up with social media at the times when I'm trying to do that. It just feels like a lot. And I'm not convinced I would necessarily get that much faster if I was working digitally because I think it would just present its own different suite of problems for
Right.
whatever I gained in efficiency. Maybe I will change my mind on this. And I think there is something appealing to me about the transportability of digital. I'm seeing these cartoonists who are just able to whip out their little tablet or whatever and draw anywhere. And I'm pretty limited to drawing at my desk these days. But I think what is more interesting to me is actually just getting faster at drawing and like trying to be less precious about my drawing and put out comics that are maybe a little bit more rough and quick than going digital at this
Hmm.
moment in time.
Right, right. Okay, I appreciate that. You're no stranger to awards. Currently, you're nominated for the Bédélys Award, the Cartoonist Studio Prize, and now the Carol Shields Award. What do these nominations really mean to you?
I don't know. Honestly, the main part of being nominated for awards is getting to check out who else is nominated. And if I don't know them, then I get to read their work and feel very pleased that I'm being listed next to someone else who made a cool book. The times when they've traveled me to go to ceremonies and stuff, it's really cool to meet those artists. I'm not always the most proactive researcher of other people's work. And so things like awards kind of shove really excellent books just in front of me. That becomes my reading list or it becomes a motivation to read the work before I meet the person so we can talk about it together. As for the actual award, like I feel quite ambivalent about them. I think I got really lucky that I was given a talking to by my publisher when I was with Fantagraphics and I put out my first book. And he was like, look, this kind of literary graphic novel often wins awards. Don't take it too seriously. Like, either way, if you win it or if you just get nominated and you don't win it, don't take it too seriously. And I think that was good advice because it's always kind of mysterious who ends up winning these things and for what reason. And sometimes they have had really big material impact on my life, and sometimes they haven't at all. And mostly it's just like a nod of recognition. I think in this moment in time when, my work is, I have like quite a practical relationship to my work and I'm very committed to making it regardless of the reception. I feel quite ambivalent about them. But it's also easy to say that when you're getting nominated for stuff. So
Right, right. Well, I guess the reward itself is making the book and holding it in your hand, I guess, for the most
it
part.
really is. It's the reward is getting to do this all the time. Like, not to be too naff about it because I know that's what people say and it's so annoying, but like it feels like an absurd luxury just to be able to make comics most of the time.
Right.
That
Well,
is definitely a reward.
yeah. Well, we've been talking about canon. I'm wondering if we could talk about anything else you're working on. Can you give us a hint about your next project?
Sure, I got a few of them on the go at the moment. One of the treats that I've given myself after finishing Canon, because it was the second graphic novel I did in a handful of years, and both Canon and Stone Fruit were kind of more on the serious end. So the little treat to myself is that I've made these ridiculous characters that live in a stove in the back alleyway of my house, and they're called Maeve and Ada, and one of them's a goblin and the other one is a bear. And they're kind of like a Bert and Ernie couple, and it's just about their life in the laneway. They're kind of like little strips, usually like 4 to 6 panels, and I'm just putting them on my Patreon, and they're just like my chance to write little gags and fanciful little strips and have a little bit of a break from serious matters. So that's one of the projects in a very unambitious way. And then another one is that I'm doing a series of short stories as my next book. A few of them are just like me working on them alone. There's some themes emerging that I will not say for now because I'm still kind of feeling them out. But the thing that I'm excited about with this project is that I get to collaborate with two of my favorite fiction authors, and those are Francesca Equiasi and Felix Chow Bradley. And they're both dear friends, also live in Montreal, and we're committing this year to developing two scripts together, like one each, that I will turn into a comic for this collection. So I'm very excited about those.
Absolutely. Yeah. Something to look forward to. Before we started recording, you had mentioned that you'd just gotten back from Australia. You're definitely traveling still to promote the book. Do you have any events coming up where have some free time to get out there and meet people, as you say, and network?
I mean, all the events just happened in over the last, 4 weeks in Australia. There was maybe, I would dare say, an overabundance of events. And so I'm kind of desperate to just not be social for a while. It is an incredible blessing to go and meet comics people and to meet the people who are reading my work. I kind of can't believe that anyone shows up to these things. But I have kind of been doing that on and off nonstop since September. And so I'm looking forward to, I think the next month is just making work in my house, which I'm really quite excited for. I think the next comics event that I will be doing is going to be TCAF in June. And I think that is going to happen, let's see. There's the MCAF before, but I think I'm going to be out of town for that. TCAF is maybe going to be the 5th of June. So if anyone's in Toronto and wants to come say hi, I will probably be at TCAF, and I'd love to see you.
Well, I'm sure people will definitely drop by to say hello for sure. So everything you have on the go today and in the future, where do you recommend that people go online to find out more about you?
I have a website, which is, if you just Google my name and you type cargo afterwards, you will find it there. It's also linked from my Instagram, which is just _Lee Lai on Instagram. I'm like medium good at responding to messages, so feel free to drop a line. I love it when people email me. That is always my favorite form. It feels like a slower way of corresponding, and I like it. Or if you live in Montreal, you can just probably find me around it. Like I love going to cartoonist book launches at the Drawn and Quarterly bookstore. So I'm often there. Or I'm hiding in my house.
Well, Lee, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something that I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
My favorite question at the moment has been, because there's a strong theme of horror films in canon. And so my favorite question that I'm going to throw back at you is like, what is your favorite horror film? I would love to know your answer, and I'd love to share mine.
Oh, I'm not a big horror fan.
Fair enough.
But where sort of the Venn diagram comes together, I guess I'd say Alien.
Okay, that's
first one.
Genuinely very scary film, though. I think that's a horror film.
Now, how about you? What's your favorite horror film?
Historically, I'm a scaredy cat, so I didn't watch them. And the years of writing this book, I watched many. And so I would, like, probably true horror fans would say this is not a real horror film either, but I loved Parasite. It made me laugh and cry, and I thought it was very scary and also really profound. And then my aspirational favorite horror film that I refuse to see because I think it's too scary, but I think it's a fascinating concept, is It Follows, which I have aspirations of watching in the next 12 months if I'm brave enough.
Thanks to Lee for the chat. You can discover more about Lee Lai online at lee-lai.cargo.site and on Instagram at _LEELAI. You can discover more about canon on the Drawn and Quarterly website. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to even more conversations with creators about making comic books and graphic novels. I also encourage you to subscribe via the website so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow True North Country Comics on most social media platforms, and you can send any and all feedback to John at truenorthcountrycomics.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2026.